Okay, I am very pleased to introduce my very first guest on the Shared Path. He's a man who's been heard by millions, yet many don't know who he is. Cayman Kelly is so much more than just his voice. He joins us now to share his path to success and many life lessons. I'm pleased to welcome my great friend, Cayman Kelly. Thank
Thank
you
you.
for
Thank
joining.
you. Thank you, Maggie. I just want to throw a round of applause in there for you. Thank you for doing this. Get
Hey,
to it. The shared path. I love it.
thank you. You know, a long time ago, not that long ago, you kept saying, Maggie, when you gonna start going on the radio again or doing something? I said, I don't know. And he said, and I have quoted you multiple times since then. You can't learn to drive with your car parked. And I
Oh,
said,
Lord.
okay, that's the truth. You know, you said, get it out of
Yeah,
neutral and get it on the road.
it is. That's it. There's so many sayings that mean so much to our lives that we can apply. And I remember years ago, I befriended this lady, and she was a grief counselor. So, like a lot of things that she told me, I still remember to this day.
Hmm.
We were about to lose our jobs. Well, I was anyway. And she said, "How you feeling, Doc?" And I said, "I'm okay. I'm cool." And she said, "Listen," she said, "that is a loss in your life that you're going to have to learn to grieve." And I said, "No, I'm really fine." And she said, "I think when it happens, there's going to be a lot more impact that you feel because it becomes a part of your daily life." And she said, and grieving, people don't understand it's a process. So here's what she said. She said, "Doc, if you went outside right now, your tire was flat on your car, would you pull up a chair and sit down and wait for it to pump itself back up?" And I said, "No."
Yeah.
She said, "Absolutely not, because there's a process to getting that tire back in working order so you can drive off." And it's the same thing with life processes. There's a lot of things that we have to do. And I've always recognized your gift with dealing with people and your voice and connecting with people and the things that you do. And that's your passion as well as your purpose. And that's why I was on you. I said, "You need to start this up because you're good at what you do. And it's not without reason either." You know what I mean? Because a lot of people will look at it and be like, "Oh, that's easy." It's not.
Mhm. Yeah. And we were just talking about that yesterday. A lot of people look at you and go, oh, look at him. And, look how easy he is. He sits at his home and, he speaks into a microphone and look how great he's doing. Well, you didn't begin there, did you? Let's talk
Absolutely
about
right.
that beginning because you didn't have this same voice, but you had a voice similar at a very young age.
Yeah. So my voice changed when I was 12 years old, believe it or not. And I got teased about my voice a lot. So, kids in school be like, "Here come Lurch. What's up, Lurch?" Like and all those things, but
Yeah.
it never really bothered me. And I didn't understand what I had at the time, of course. But you know what I think sparked my interest in radio is people would always say, "You sound like one of them dudes off the radio." And it was so interesting how things panned out because a buddy of mine and I were doing music together. And he called the radio station and he called me. He said, "Man, I'm about to be on the radio." And when I turned it on, he was on there rapping about a contest that they were doing. And the guy on the air at the time, he invited us to the radio station. So my father drove us. And when I saw the makings of radio, I said, "Oh, I gotta do this." So it was funny because when we walked in, the guy that was doing production, he said, "Oh my God, how old are you?" And I said, "I'm 15." He said, "With a voice like that," and he handed me this script to read. It was for like a club or something. And when I read that thing, who would have known that years later? That's why I think life is so funny how it pans out.
Mhm.
But that was my passion with always being on the radio and being in school. I would see people come in and they'd be like, "I sat in those same seats that you sat in, and I had dreams of being on the radio. It just doesn't work like that." And I would always sit there and think, like, just because your journey panned out that way doesn't mean somebody else's journey is going to pan out that way.
Yeah.
And then, a lot of times people think about the reward that things will bring. And then they think about the work that goes into it and they're not willing to put in the work. So that's why a lot of times we end up not doing things.
Right. Exactly. And again, people would think it's a magic bullet, but it isn't. You
Mhm.
you didn't you like me started out kind of like an intern, unpaid, but very much appreciated because you showed up on time.
Oh,
Talk
yeah.
about that.
You know what's funny? I never had an internship. It was fun because I used my connections that I had made while I was in high school, because I was in 10th grade the first time I ever visited a radio station. And that's when I learned the powers of networking. I kept in contact with those folks. And like I said, we were doing music, and the guy's name Albie D. Albie D was the biggest thing on radio in DC, but he treated us like superstars. So if we were performing, he would show up with the radio station limousine and pick us up and stuff like that. So we were always connected to him, and I knew the receptionist really well. So we always remained friends. And, and I always tell people this: a receptionist is the gatekeeper. They know everybody.
In the mailroom.
Oh my gosh, you got to treat them nice, because she
Yes.
put me in position for so many things to come later on in life. So when I graduated from college, I went back and I was looking for a job. And she said, we have a job fair that we're going to do. And I said, cool. And she said, come ride with us tomorrow. So Maggie, I showed up to the station and I thought I was early. And I kept looking around for the vehicle, but they were gone already. And, this was before cell phone. I couldn't afford a cell phone and all that stuff. It was expensive back then. So I go to the station door at the building, and they had a phone in the front. So I pick up the security phone. Albie D was on the air. So he buzzed me up, and I go in and I have a conversation with him because he already knew me. Like I had planted these seeds to grow into a
Right.
tree.
Right.
Everybody's already looking for the tree, but I had already planted the seeds. So we go in and we have a conversation. I said, dude, I'm looking for a job and blah, blah, blah. He said, well, I don't have a job to give you, but I certainly need someone to help me out here on my show. And I said, well, cool, I do it. So like you said, there was no money behind this thing, but I was going, and it was some of the best days of my life because I was living out my passion. I was learning, which you can't put a price tag on.
Right.
He said it's a good way to get your foot back in the door. Then as people see you around, they'll notice your work ethic, and who knows what these things will turn into. So, within that same year, I went from helping him out on his show. I ended up working in promotions because I went out in the street and I showed off. And mind you, I grew up shy, so I was really timid, but I knew I had to break out of that because I wasn't going to eat if I didn't open my mouth. So I went out there and I hustled up, and they offered me a job. I got a job in promotions. Then I learned how to run the board from him. So I was a board operator, all in the same year. And then I got on the air. Somebody got sick. And they asked me, they said, dude, you want to work? And I said, yeah, I want to work. I didn't even know what it was. But I said, yes, because I'm at work. Yeah, we should be working.
So you've also been observing what was going on. Absolutely. Your eyes were wide open and your mind was there for learning, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it wasn't no money. And then when I started making money, it was a little tiny bit of money.
But $6 an hour? Isn't that what you started at? Something like that?
$6 an hour. Exactly right. But the $6 an hour wasn't for a full day. They paid me for 4 hours per day, even though I worked all day.
$1.25 an hour.
That's what you were at? $1.25. That's what your starting point was?
No, my very first real paying job on the radio was at KANU. That's what it was called then, the Kansas University Network. They carried all the games, everything. And I worked there and I made $186.56 per month doing an on-air shift, working for the KU Sports Network, where I learned a lot. My love of sports. I was the traffic coordinator. And back then, you remember they had the big tapes that they would ship from one tape to one station to another. That's how I started out. $186.56 per month. And I was happy to have it. Yes.
Right. And see, that's where you're passionate about something.
Mm-hmm.
I don't say this out loud often, but this is something I would do for free just because it feeds my spirit. I love it. I love the prep that goes into it. I read every day, and it's crazy when you can have a conversation just about anything. That's where my passion lies. I love, plus you get to connect with people.
Yeah, very true. Very, very true. Well, let's move ahead where you're making a little bit more money, because you and I came in contact at SiriusXM. I was there from the first day that XM came on the air. The day they did the switch, I was there saying, Hallelujah, I'm going to be here forever. And, I know you came in a bit later, but oh, what fun we had at XM
Oh,
and
that's
Sirius
right.
XM, and you still are there.
Yeah. So the XM thing, I was actually kind of there from the beginning, but they had outsourced a lot of the channels
Exactly.
in the urban. So I worked at BET. They had a third party channel called BET Uptown,
Hmm.
and none of the stuff ever worked. So we ended up always coming to XM, to work. And that's how I met a lot of people that worked directly for XM. So that year when things went defunct at BET, they said, we're not doing this anymore. There's no profits from this. I was sitting on the sideline, Maggie. And I was like, oh my gosh, I had just gotten married. We had just built a house. And we when we settled on that house, we literally had spent the night in there. My attorney called me the next day and told me I wasn't going to have a job anymore. So, my reaction was like, oh my God, just like you, like this is going to be my life right here.
Yeah.
I don't even know how to do anything else.
Hmm.
Man, I cried. I cried a lot, like especially at nighttime when I would go in the basement by myself to try to figure this thing out. I would boo hoo. I was like, how am I gonna take care of my wife? How am I gonna pay this mortgage with no money coming in? But watch how funny life is. So me being at BET and networking with folks from the creative services department, because we would find out what they were doing so we could talk about things on the radio. I met so many people, and that had actually birthed my voiceover career because they would stop past the studio and say, can you voice this for us? And I said, yeah, but they wasn't paying me anything. So when they kept doing it, I said, man, y'all got to pay me for this.
Yeah.
And they said, okay, how much? And I just shot out a figure. And they said, okay, no problem. So next thing you know, I had a contract. And I had learned from being on the radio, my first radio gig, my program director told me that I was a great guy. He said, but your follow up is weak. And I said, well, what does that mean? He said, never once have you come and pitched to me that you wanted this position full time. I was already on the air by then.
Hmm.
And I said, I thought if I did a good job that you would come back to me and tell me that, you're doing a great job. We want to hire you. He said, no, it doesn't work like that. If you don't speak up for yourself, we roll right over you. So that was a lesson that I learned that I still apply to my life to this very day. I don't even know if
Yep.
he ever remembers telling me that. So now that I have that in the back of my mind, everything that I did, I'm going to speak for myself. So that's when I said, pay me this. And they paid me. And I was already hustling because I taught myself how to do production. And I was using my voice. And I was sending this thing to this guy that was running the BET digital networks. And it took months, but it panned out. He said, dude, we're going to pay you on retainer. So I had that. And I was voicing the radio spots for BET. And then I became the voice of BET. But because I was so focused on the problem of me losing a job, I forgot about that. I could not see any of that. And do you know that money that I was making, I was paying my bills with that.
Hmm.
I went back to work at a radio station. The money wasn't great, but that same money that I used to blow from working at the club, getting paid in cash, I was spending that on bills and saving it. So it taught me a level of discipline. I couldn't blow that money anymore.
Yeah.
I had to grow up, so like all of these life lessons and me being in a place that birthed my voiceover career. I voiced BET for at least 7 or 8 years until it blossomed into other things.
And then, wow, Heart and Soul at XM. You
Yeah.
took off. You're still
Hmm.
there
Yeah.
Monday through Saturday.
I don't
Doing
do
the,
Saturdays anymore.
oh, you don't do Saturdays anymore?
No,
Okay.
that was
Oh,
one of the things that I cut back on after I had my stint in the hospital
yeah.
from
All
having.
right, listen, you brought it up. Let's talk about that wake up call you really got
Oh boy, was it a wake up call?
because you just had to keep working, right?
I'm laughing because it's true. And
Hmm.
I think, honestly, Maggie, and I preach about it. And I was talking about this on the air the other day, how I prayed that Barry White song, practice what you preach. And I said, man, it's
Hmm.
so funny how we can tell other people things to do, but we don't do the same things that we tell other people to do. I used to always tell my dad, take it easy, man. You can't do everything. And here I am. And I think it's become a part of business culture and Western civilization in the way men approach things. You're never supposed to cry. You got to be tough. And I've heard so many people tell their testimonies about being ill and they just ignored it and they had a bad outcome. I heard those stories. So why is it that when it happens to me, I ignored it? I knew something was happening to me. I had taken the kids to
That
the
day,
dentist. Yeah,
how
that
much
day.
that day? Because I've heard that day, I've read about that day, but talk about that day.
That day, it was January 17th, which is Martin Luther King Day. Everybody's home from school. My wife's home from work. Kids had dentist appointments. I had an audition that morning. And some days doing voiceovers, you have off days like, dang, I can't really get through this script. Let me step away from it for a minute and come back to it. I was having that day. I laid on the floor for a bit. My wife said, I'll take the kids to the dentist. I said, no, I got it. I'll take them. We get in the car. We drive. This hand is numb. I thought it was because I laid on, but I wasn't laying on this side. I laid on this side. But we try to discount everything. I said, man, my hand feels weird. And the feeling never really came back. I drive fine. I walk fine. And when I get to the dentist, they go in because of COVID. I had to sit in the hallway. So I'm sitting there and I'm trying to email my agents about this audition. Can I get an extension? Can I turn it in later? Maggie, I could not type. I kept seeing the same letters come up over. I said, what in the world is wrong? Then I would delete it and I go back and try to do it again. So the motor skills are shot in his hand. Then I had to go to the bathroom. I get up, I go to the bathroom, door's locked. So I sit back down. I was like, oh, I don't feel like getting this key. But mind you, I'm 50 years old. So when you got to go, you better go. Otherwise,
Mhm.
you'll come with a vengeance. So I said, okay, let me go get this key. I go get the key and open the door, use the bathroom, and I'm about to wash my hands. Turn the water on. And I'm standing there, Maggie. And I swear, like, I don't know what it is to be. I've never been high or anything, but if I had to use my imagination, this is what it was like because I would think something and my body wasn't responding. And the thought would come back around again. And I said, damn. And then I realized I was just standing in front of the sink. I wasn't washing my hands. So that signaled a cognitive decline. I ignored that again. So I said, dang, I started talking to myself. I said, you got to wash your hands. So I put my left hand in the water. Now getting the soap, this hand still wasn't moving. So I said, damn, I said, what in the hell is wrong with me? So I put my right hand down and I started washing it, but I had to take my left hand and wash the right hand off. Then I dried them. I went and put the key back and sat back down. So I tried to start emailing again. And I had a hockey session because, I voiced NHL and they wanted to schedule a session. So they asked me, could they move it back some? So I'm trying to respond. I could not respond to that. Kids finish up. I make them a 6-month appointment. We get in the hallway. We go downstairs. I get in the car. Maggie, I'm sitting there. I know I got to put this car in reverse and move it, but I couldn't. I don't know how long I was sitting there. And I finally got it together. I drive home, which is probably about 10 or 15 minutes away. I went to wave at one of my neighbors that was coming out when I came in. I put this arm up like that. It was the weirdest feeling. And I said, oh my God, what is wrong with my hand? I pulled in a driveway, but I couldn't navigate to get in the garage. So my son said, go ahead and pull in the garage, Daddy. I said, I am. I just need a minute. I said, I don't feel good. And I finally pulled in. I don't know how long I was sitting. And I went in. And what did I immediately do, Maggie? You could probably
Go
take.
right back down to the mic.
I went right back down to my studio. And I tried to use this hand to get it up to the cursor so I could hit the record button. Wasn't happening. So I started getting frustrated. I went across to the bathroom and I'm looking at myself to see if I looked different. And I just started crying, like, what in the world is wrong with me? And my son came and he said, Dad, can you help me open this? And I said, give me a minute. So I'm manning up now, right? I'm wiping the tears away. And then I opened the door. He was standing there with a jar. Maggie, I took the jar and popped the lid off, opened it right up. So I had grip strength, but I didn't have motor skills. So I said, okay, that's interesting. So he said, Dad, he said, I'm fixing breakfast. He brings food down to my studio and I sit it down and I try to eat. I get the food. I cannot put my hand up to my mouth. I didn't realize it at first, but I was compensating and I was taking this left hand and lifting it up. I finished the food, went upstairs, and I said, you know what? I'm going to try to wash some dishes to get this hand moving again. My son said, Dad, I got it. Just go ahead and do whatever you need to do. That's when I should have known something was wrong. These kids don't volunteer to do nothing unless you ask them to do something.
They act like you're speaking a foreign language, huh?
Right. Exactly. So I said, for him to volunteer, he knows something wrong with me.
Yeah.
And, and I started to wash the dish. Then I took 4 ibuprofens, right? Thinking I got a pinched nerve. I'm self-diagnosing myself. I said, okay, I'm going to loosen this thing up and get this hand moving again. I get back down to the studio and my wife was calling me because I left my phone in here. So when I answered, I wasn't going to say anything was wrong with me. She was coming back from her dentist appointment, which they call her early to. This is how funny life is.
Mm-hmm.
They had a cancellation. So she went early and she was on her way back home. So I said, hello. And she said, hey. I said, hey. She said, what's wrong? And I said,
And fool those wives, honey.
I said, I'm not really having a good day. And she said, what's wrong? I said, I can't really feel my right hand. And she said, well, did you dial 911? And I said, no, I didn't. She said, well, you should dial 911. She said, if you don't, I'm going to take you to the emergency room when I get home. And she did. I made every excuse as to why I didn't need to go. Right. I don't need to go because in my mind, I'm thinking, I got this NHL session. I need to be here to do that. Not thinking like, I hope I'm okay so I can do the work. You know what I mean? Because if you don't have health, you can't do anything anyway.
Right.
And it's bad when we get to a point in our business culture where we sacrifice our bodies and our lives to maintain, because I always felt like, especially as an African-American man, I had to go above and beyond to be seen. So I never was able to celebrate the history moments that I created, being the first African-American voice as an imaging voice for ESPN radio nationally. And then I had Monday Night Football. All of these things I never really celebrated. It was just kind of like, okay, good, keep moving. Right.
Right.
So I had that mindset even up till she got home and she said, grab both of my hands. So I grabbed her hand. She said, squeeze. And I squeezed her hands. And she said, that's interesting. You have equal grip strength on both sides. So I'm thinking she's going to let me go. And she said, go ahead and finish getting your clothes on. I'm going to take you to the hospital anyway. She said, if nothing's wrong, they just send you back home. She said, because your speech sounds weird. I said, okay. So I got in the car. And that's when it hit me that this was more than just my hand. I started thinking about the bathroom moment. I started thinking about when I was sitting in the car and couldn't get in reverse, thinking about pulling in the garage, using my hand to compensate. All of these thoughts were coming now. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to hit BJ and let him know I'm not going to be on the air. So I pick up the phone like I'm about to text Maggie. I can't text. And I could see her looking out the corner of her eye like that. And I tried to play it off like I was I held the phone up like this, like I was typing.
Gotta use your left hand.
Oh my gosh. And I was so frustrated. I dropped the phone on the floor a couple of times and I picked it up. I tried to play it off. And we got closer to the hospital. I ended up calling and telling him I was on my way to the hospital. Nobody's going to be on the air. So he said, oh my God. He said, keep me posted. So I went in, and long story short, we went through so much there, which shows a disparity in our healthcare system. That's for a later conversation. By my wife being a physician, she knew how to navigate the healthcare system, which helped. And I think everybody needs some kind of advocate when you go to the hospital, because if you don't feel good, there's no way for you to speak up for yourself, really. So she advocated for my health the whole time I was in there. They did an MRI. And I remember waking up because I fell asleep. I had an adverse reaction to Ativan that they gave me. I started itching and they gave me a Benadryl and knocked my behind out.
Plus, you'd already had that 4 ibuprofen, which was not
Right.
the lead up to it, you know?
You fussed with me about that. I ain't tell her I took 4, but I said I took some ibuprofen. She said, "Why would you do that?" She said, "If you have a bleed on your brain, it makes it worse." But people don't really know that. I mean, I
Yeah.
probably knew, but I wasn't thinking like that. I'm just trying to get my hand working. So anyway, from the MRI, I remember talking to the physician, and he said, "We found a clot on your brain." He said, "You had a stroke, and you will be admitted because it is life threatening." And I was like, "Oh my God." I just remember thinking, wow, I'm not even 50 yet. I hadn't turned 50 yet. Shoo. And it made me have such a newfound respect for life
Hmm.
being there, because you're talking about somebody who talks for a living, and all of a sudden I can't even really talk like that anymore. They was putting stuff in my face like these pictures, and I was looking at them, but I couldn't verbalize what they were. I knew what it was, but I couldn't verbalize it. So now I'm like, oh my gosh. Every day they would come in there like every few minutes. And that next day, Maggie, like after that first day, my wife went home. She said, "Oh, I hate to leave you, but we got kids at home." So she had to make sure they were good. She came back early that next morning. They had put breakfast in there. And she said, "Oh, good, you got breakfast." She said, "You want me to get it warmed up?" Because I looked at it, but I couldn't eat it.
Hand-eye coordination was not good
And I
yet.
couldn't use this hand still. So I'm like, what the hell am I going to do with this? But eat it like a savage. And I really wasn't that hungry. So she came and I said, "Nah." And it was pancakes, it was eggs, and it was some turkey sausage. So she cut up the pancakes. I ate a few bites off of it. And she said, "I don't know about these eggs." She said, "You want to try these eggs?" And after that, Maggie, I don't remember anything. And I just saw when I came to, I was trying to catch my breath, and I saw nurses all around my bed. And I could see her standing over top of me, and she was trying to fight back tears. She was like, "Oh my God, there's so much blood." So I'm like, blood? What happened to me? And I could not talk at all.
Hmm.
I couldn't say anything. I saw them there, and I looked at this lady at the foot of the bed, and she was nervous as hell. And I found out later she was actually a doctor. She was a neurologist. And I
They're
kept
trying to
looking
help
at her.
you.
So look, and I tried to sit up because I couldn't breathe. And they said, it's okay, lay back down." I said, "Oh my God." And I'm saying in my mind, they're killing me because I can't verbalize it. I'm just trying to catch my breath. I'm not being combative. I'm
Hmm.
not going to get off the bed. But they kept pushing me down. And then they said, "We got to get a CT. We got to get another MRI," because they thought I had a brain bleed. It
Hmm.
turns out that I had a seizure because of the irritation on my brain. But I recovered, and I put in the work. They had me on a blood thinner. My wife bought her putty, and I would squeeze it, and I would go like this with it, and I'd pinch it back down. So I got this hand working again. And she told me when I had the seizure, she would lift my right arm up and it would flop back down. And she did the same thing with my leg. So when they came in one day and they said, "Can you lift both arms for me?" And I went like that. My wife started crying. But she was like, "You couldn't do that a few days ago." I didn't realize how bad it was. I didn't even know I had a stroke until I got back home out of the hospital and I heard her talking to somebody. So I didn't realize any of this. But and then when I came home and she wouldn't let me start working. She wouldn't let me take a shower by myself. "Don't bend down and wash your feet. I'll be in there to wash your feet." Like it was that kind of care.
Hmm.
And I was saying, "I'm fine." She wouldn't let me come down the steps. She called my mother. My mother came over here to babysit me when she went back to work.
She wanted you around for a while longer. But that's your call to men to pay attention because they're the worst ones. If I get more than a sniffle or an ache or something, I'm at the hospital. It's like, get this fixed. I go to an acupuncturist for immune boost. And I go to a chiropractor to get my little limbs straightened out and everything. I want to be here for a long time.
Wow.
Men say they do, but they don't pay attention just like you did.
Nope, you're right. And that's been my push, for men to go get themselves checked out. They got to get themselves checked out. And like I said, I heard so many people's testimony. Will Downing and I sat in the studio, And he told me about when he got sick, he ignored this stuff for a long time. So hearing his story, both of us were sitting in there wiping tears out our eyes. I've heard it repeatedly. I asked him to tell it again so other people would hear it. And when I got out the hospital, he was one of the first people that I called. And I said, bruh, I did something stupid. I said, as many times as I heard you tell your story, I said, I still ignored it. And I think it's this thing where like, oh, it can't happen to us.
Mm-hmm.
That ain't true at all.
Yeah.
And that thing changed my life, Maggie. I couldn't drive. I didn't drive for, let me see, it happened in January. I didn't drive again until August. I was on all this medication. Thank God I'm off of it all now, but I had to go to all these doctor's appointments and I had to rely on people to take me there. So all of a sudden I go from this independent man to being dependent on other people. And when I was sitting there and, you have so much time to think about life. And I was sitting there thinking like, man, because I would stay up all night. Or if I went to bed, I was up at 3:30 just about every morning, trying to execute everything, preparing to do a show every day. And that's the other thing that people don't realize. When you want to do a good job because your name is attached to something, you're going to work at it.
That's right.
So I read, I look at the news, I take notes. Every single day I'm executing. So that's 6 days a week. I said, because I started thinking this is the most stressful part of my day. It's not difficult to do voiceovers for me. I don't have to worry about it. They send me the script. I look at it. Okay, this should sound like this. I read it. I send it back.
Right.
There's nothing difficult about that. But all the prep that goes in, because I don't have a team that I work with. So all the prep that goes into it, I never really had a time for mental relaxation. I still got a family that I got to take care of. I got a wife that wants to go out sometime. And I want to do things.
Yeah.
So being married to the studio wasn't a good thing.
Yeah.
So I told them, I said, man, I can't execute like this anymore. I need a day off, because having to get up Saturday and still execute like that, I'm not having a chance to mentally break, or I'm going to mentally break.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to feel it. I can't do this anymore.
Right.
And I didn't need it. You know what I mean? And I had to fight to get that. So, and it says something about business culture again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they'll run you right into the ground.
Yes.
They'll even say thank you and bye-bye.
Yeah.
They can say bye-bye real quick though, can't they?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like you could get gone, but at the same token, we shouldn't feel guilty for saying no.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of power in the word no. And people have a lot more respect for you when you stand up for yourself.
Exactly.
And I told him, I said, I'm not working weekends anymore. I said that, but it put my name on the schedule again. I had to stand up for it again. I said, no, I meant what I said.
Yeah.
And they said, I don't have anybody. That's not my fault.
Yeah. Find somebody.
Yeah. I mean, if you play a game, you got to have all the pieces so you can make the move.
Yeah.
You can't show up in a school, well, at least in our day, with a pencil and paper. You needed your pencil and your paper so you can execute your assignments. Now you need your Chromebook and your iPad.
Exactly. Let's talk about, you're giving us a health update, but let's talk about some of the other moves that you've made. Like you said, you're a father, and the lessons you're trying to teach your children. Because you got some boys.
I got boys and I got a girl.
And you got a girl. And you need, they need life's lessons. Because like you said, you're a very successful entrepreneur, because that's what I'm going to call you, and voiceover artist, and your wife is a physician. So you live a good life, but they have to learn their responsibilities too.
Absolutely.
And how you're teaching that, because there are a lot of people. I mean, I grew up middle class, but I still had my responsibilities, We still had things that we had to do in order to succeed, and expectations that my parents set for us in order to meet and grow.
Yeah. And Maggie, to that point, I've seen a lot of things shift in the style of parenting over the years, just because you have to be a part of a learning curve, because you didn't have social media, you didn't have internet when we were growing up. So we played outside. The street lights were your indication that you need to come in the house. But now you got to force kids to go outside, and all three of my kids are very different from each other. My girl was the firstborn. She's in college now. In college, she has blossomed. Do you hear me? She has blossomed and she's come into her own. And I'm proud of her for that. But one of the things that we have to learn as a parent is that we're dealing with individuals. They're going to make their own decisions. All we can do is guide to the best of our ability. Because you think about the stuff that our parents knew, that's all they knew. So they passed that down to you. And I write about that. And I'm quite sure we'll talk about the book later, but I
Yes.
wrote a chapter about haters and naysayers. And I consider my parents to be a naysayer. They mean well, but just because your goal seems like it's too big to obtain, it doesn't mean it's not going to happen for me. So they're very protective. And I can see the same thing happening with me. I'm protective of my kids. You never want to see them disappointed. You don't want to see them get hurt. But then we have to remind ourselves that these are individuals. They have to try things. They're never going to be you. So, my style of parenting, I want my kids to have experiences. I don't want to just talk about it. I'm going to show you something that you can learn from. And I give you an example, and you and I probably talked about this. So I went to Atlanta for a business meeting because I like to have FaceTime with my clients. I'm still old school. I'm not doing all emails. I'm not doing text messages. I'm going to see you because I want you to feel my energy. I want to feel your energy so you can know who you're working with
Just
and why
look them in the eye.
yeah. So you
Yeah.
know why you should renew my contract. Like you need to know me. I want you to fall in love with me.
All over again.
Yeah, exactly. So I showed them that. I wanted to illustrate that to them. I took them to a basketball game, and I connected with a friend of mine I hadn't seen in years. So, it showed them the power of friendship. It showed them the power of network because we had good seats that I paid for. But then he texted me and said, man, I got 4 seats open now. He was sitting on the court. So we got upgraded from good to excellent. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And when we got back to the hotel, I said, guys, listen to me. What you experienced tonight, I hope it unleashes a fire in you for you to understand mediocrity doesn't have a place. You got to go above and beyond being mediocre. I said, it shows you the power of friendship, what you witnessed. It shows you the power of a network, and it shows you the power of working hard. Because, yeah, I can afford to put you in a place, but you got to be able to get it yourself.
Right.
And another lesson that I taught them, another lesson that I share with them, my grandmother passed, my maternal grandmother, she passed away 4 years ago. Her house was just sitting in North Carolina. I bought that house. I took them with me to fix the house. So we upgrade. We didn't know what we were doing, but we took a contractor. I want them to experience it and the reason why I kept the house, because it's easy for us to unload stuff and sell it all the time.
Right.
But, and I want them to
And then
be.
years later, y'all broke, and then you wonder why.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I have the deed sit right in front of me. I got papers right here. You can't see them, but I have the original mortgage from that house. My great grandparents bought that house in the 50s for $7,500. They paid $52 a month for 20 years until the house was paid off. $7,500, I could write a check for that right now.
Mm-hmm.
But they paid for 20 years for $52 a month. And I said, why in the world would I get rid of something like that? Because I know I grew up around them, so I know how hard they worked.
That's your legacy.
People's houses. My great grandfather worked at a doctor's house outside all day as his landscaper / gardener. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I saw that. I saw the sacrifice that they created. So now I want to keep their legacy alive because their sacrifice put us in a place to achieve things that they were never able to receive. So I fixed that house, I rented it out, and I showed them how to construct a business. I got 65 and a half acres of land in North Carolina that I made them put on some boots and walk it with me. I want you to see this, because you got to get your own. Me and your mama work for this, but you got to get your own, and I showed them how to set things up. I showed them how to set up a business. I showed them how we going to develop this land into something that it can be beneficial. It's not enough just to have stuff and have it sitting there, but it's not serving a purpose.
Right.
So these are the lessons that I'm trying to teach them through experiences. Yeah, we can have fun, But if you set this up right, that's passive income that you don't necessarily have to work for. You can do other things. So I'm trying to get them out of the mindset of they can only do one thing. You can do more. And matter of fact, if you don't do more than one thing, you're going to be in trouble nowadays.
Right. But even more so, they can't keep going to mom and dad to get
Absolutely
what they
not.
want. Yeah.
Yes. I
Yeah.
want you to grow up. I want you to have your own.
Yeah. Yeah. I want you to get off my paycheck.
Come on now. Get off of a lot of things I want to do for me.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Listen, let's talk about your book because it is awe-inspiring. It really is. Yeah, I told you to bring that on up. Show it to folks.
Boom. There it is right there.
Boom, there it is. And if you can see it, it says from $6 an hour to $1 million dream. But there's a little something underneath it. The process isn't easy, but your decisions determine your outcome.
There it is.
And we all have made bad decisions,
Yeah.
but the idea is to make less bad decisions and make more good decisions.
Yeah.
The way you do it is by moving forward.
Absolutely. And sometimes, to your point, when we make decisions, sometimes we expect them to be the best decisions, but they don't always turn out like that. So we should treat that as a learning tool.
Thank you.
You know what I mean? So we can always go back and correct it. You can't do that over, because once that moment is gone, it's gone. And that's the problem with some of our mindsets. We live in the past so much. I used to, but you can't anymore. I have a friend that I fuss with right now to this day because he always talks about things that he wish he had done. And I said, man, you can't cry about that. There's no way you can do that over. What are you going to do with the time that you have left now?
Mhm.
And I swear, Maggie, being in the hospital and having my life threatened already, it made me unleash. I don't fear anything really. I said, man, I'm getting ready to do this because I don't want to die with regrets. That's
Mhm.
the richest place on earth is the graveyard.
Yeah.
All that potential that people had that they never tried because they were scared, it goes right in the grave with you. And
Right.
we're not coming back once we're gone. So that's one of the things not to cut you, I see you get ready to talk, but
No, no, no.
I
I was just
gotta
getting
say
ready to
this.
add to that. Yeah.
I gotta say this. When I was 49 and I was just about to turn 50, it bothered me. I was emotional behind it. And I sat down, not to the point where I was like, oh my God, I'm 50 years old. But the impact that it had on me, I sat down and I write a lot. So I started typing this thing out on the computer and I listed all the successes that I've had in my 50 years of being on the earth. And I said, was I a good father? And I started asking myself questions. If I was to leave here today, does it end there? Or does my life have a legacy? Did I treat people fairly? Do people still talk about me after I'm gone? Did I have some kind of impact on the community? These were things that I was asking myself. And then it was affirmed, like it was confirmed by listening to other people talk. I met this lady years ago, and she's like one of my best friends now. And she was doing an interview, and the things that she talked about, it was like, God, I was standing in the kitchen crying. She was doing an interview on CBS this morning. And I said, man, I got to reach out to this lady some kind of way. And we connected, but I saw her on an interview, another interview. It was on YouTube. And I typed this comment, thank you for being so transparent. This is going to bless so many lives. And I could see them start to read the comments. They was looking at it like that. And she went, she said, Cayman Kelly. She said, I don't know if this is the Cayman Kelly, but I listen to you every day and blah, 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 blah. So now I'm realizing the impact. And here's what she said, because she dealt with existentialism. And people that are existential, they think, what is the purpose of life? Why do we do all of this and we still have to die? And this lady is filthy rich. You think by having material possessions, it changes somebody, but she still dealt with the same depression and anxiety that a lot of people deal with. And she was being transparent about this. So it was such a blessing to see it, that it brought me to tears. And we talked like we had known each other for years. But here's what she said on the interview after she said, I listen to you every day. She said, and you say some of the most beautiful things, and I just sit and I cry sometime. And she said, and I got to tell you, I hope this is you. She said, I just got to tell you this. She said, because music is one of my lifelines, and you're one of the reasons why I'm still here. Man, I lost it.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? It confirmed that I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. Because I used to always tell my mother, I said, being on the radio is not just being on the radio to me.
That's right.
It's a ministry. And that's
Yeah.
why I'm trying to be cautious with the things that I say out of my mouth. I'm always looking for things that I can say that can be a betterment to other people's lives.
Uplifting. Yeah.
Yes. It's
Yes.
about blessing people because when you're blessed, you're supposed to give it back.
Yeah.
You're not blessed just to keep it to yourself.
Exactly. Exactly. You know, I that's one of the things when you talked about Will Downing, and then I come down the hall from you, and I'm on air, and you bring Will Downing into my studio. I was flabbergasted. I said, "Oh my God, it's Will Downing," and I just wanted him to sing. But we wound up chatting and everything. But you did that more than a couple times, and I always appreciated it. But you, in particular, brought people who had something uplifting to say. And that's the way I always did my show. And that's what people always told me, that
Hmm.
that's what they liked about my show. And my whole idea was to talk about financial security, to talk about education, to
Yes.
talk about how we can lift each other up, not negativity. I was always bringing book authors on and things like that.
Mhm.
Now, a
Yeah.
lot of it was adventure and stuff, but don't stand and wait for somebody else to do something for you.
Come
You
on.
got to do it yourself. You want something, you desire something. You don't know how often when you open the door, what good can come in. But if you sit there and say, nobody's opened the door for me,
Come
well,
on,
guess
man.
what?
Oh my God.
Gonna
Oh my God.
not
You
gonna
said a
open.
mouthful. You know how many
Yeah.
times I have given that message?
Mm-hmm.
Because we were all created and we're unique
Right.
individuals.
Right.
And I think my biggest message in life right now, and I talk about this all the time, is individuality and authenticity.
Right.
Because we live in a society where it's not okay to be an individual. If you don't do it this way, you're doing it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the case at all.
Right.
Because 2 plus 2 is 4, 3 plus
Always.
1 is 4. You know what I mean? There's a lot
Very
of ways that you can get to the number 4. You don't have to do
yeah,
it the same way that everybody else does. And
exactly.
then if you sit back and really think about it, most of the people who have been unconventional, they always stand out. And I could give you examples like from Jay-Z, who grew up in the Marcy Projects, one of the toughest
Mm-hmm.
projects in the United States of America. He was a drug dealer. Nobody would give him a record deal because they thought he was too old. So what did he do? He created his own label.
Mm-hmm.
Still successful to this day. And that dude is a billionaire.
Yeah.
That runs circles around people that went to school for business. Unconventional.
Mm-hmm.
Steve
Yeah.
Jobs, he was a dropout. You know what I mean? You just got so many people that you can look at that were unconventional. And I look at all of these artists that I interviewed that went to Berkeley and they bucked the system. They don't do anything that they learned.
That's right.
That's
That's
not
right.
a part of them. That's not them. We
Mm-hmm.
have to be unique. We have to be individuals.
Very true. Very, very true. I also I love the saying that Bishop T.D. Jakes says, you're as young as you're going to be today, but you're also the oldest you're going to be. And that's when he talks about the book Destiny. To me, I mean, he's written many books, but
Yeah.
that still is my absolute favorite because how many of us are really fulfilling our destiny?
Yeah.
And way too often we sidestep it, we make excuses, we keep our car parked for too long.
Hmm. Come on. You turned it right back around.
Exactly. But when it's, you have to keep striving and looking forward. Like you said earlier, can't keep looking back. There's
Hmm.
nothing we can do about it. Can't even go back and get the last second. We can't go back and get the last 40 minutes that we've been talking. They're done.
Oh, it's gone.
Mm-hmm. Very
Yeah.
true.
So,
Very, very true.
speaking of the past, I think the only reason why you should look back is to use it as a measuring tool.
Yes.
History does serve a purpose. You can use it and see how far you've come. When I start thinking about to the $6 an hour days, and I say it's some of the best. I don't want to go back there. I don't want to struggle like that again. But if I had to, I think I'd be equipped to deal with it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I learned so many life lessons from having to struggle.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I heard this motivational speaker speak one day, and he said, and I got it as soon as he said it. He said, my grandfather walked 10 miles to work. My father walked 5. He said, I'm driving a Cadillac. My son drives a Mercedes. His son drives a Ferrari, but his son will be walking again. And you know what that said? I was like, wow, that's deep, because this dude that walked 10 miles to work, because of his struggle, it created strength.
Mm-hmm.
But we always want to give to the next generation so they have it a little better. So as a result of his struggle, his son only had to walk 5 miles to work. Then this next dude is driving a nice car. His son is driving a better car, and his son is driving a better car than him. But that other generation has to walk again, because
Yes.
we've gotten weaker as the generations go down, and we don't have anything to give to that next generation. So that's my whole motivation as a parent, and just as a person in general in life. Anybody that I come in contact with, let me share a word with you. I don't preach to people. That's why I lead by example. That's why I give my kids experiences, because sometimes when you talk, they don't get it. You have to meet people on a level where they are.
Very true. 100%. Well, I'm glad we leveled out.
Really, we're going to be level forever.
Forever and ever. You know how much I love you. I want to thank you so much for being my first guest, because we've shared a lot of life's lessons, and there's more to come.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
like you said, we can look back and see and enjoy the experiences that we had, but we've
Yeah.
got a lot more shared path to
Oh,
go.
come on now. I love it.
Gotta put it out there.
Like you tied it up like a shoestring back.
Oh yeah. I know when to shut up. Well, listen, thanks again to Cayman for helping me launch my podcast, The Shared Path. Lots more of Cayman can be found at his website. Beautiful website, by the way. Cayman Kelly, and that's CAYMAN
There you go.
.com. And definitely get his book, From $6 an Hour to $1 Million Dream. There it goes. And he looks that good. I like that little gray sneaking in there,
Oh,
like up
thank you.
here.
Look, I had a little trouble dealing with that at first. I was like, oh my God, I'm gray.
Yeah,
Right.
well, yeah, and you're a little bald too, but that's all right too. That's a choice, partly.
No, it ain't either. It ain't a
And thanks to all of you for joining me. It's been a pleasure. Continue to seek peace and spread lots of love. I'm Maggie Linton.